Hello to the chicos and the chicas. The Meltwater Champion Chess Tour is back in action, and so are we with a recap video. Boy oh boy, we have been treated to a large number of really fun games. So if you haven't had a chance, please go ahead, do yourself a favor and check out the games that were played in round 1 to 4. In particular, I would recommend you, other than the game I'm about to present to you, to have a look at the two friends, Giri and Vidit. Holy moly, they put on a bit of a show. But even more so, we did have a show put on by the legendary Shaq, who never fails to amaze when it comes to attacking chess. And indeed, that is what we shall have a look at again. And now it is Anish Giri on the receiving end of some very serious attacking chess. And on the menu is the Jobava London, which has become a very popular opening choice on club level. And as you can see, occasionally even the greatest guns don't shy away from chucking out the Jobava London. So here we go, bishop f4 e6. So for those who are new to the Jobava London idea, it's basically a London with bishop f4 where the knight goes to c3, and it usually means that white has got some aggressive intentions, such as an early knight b5 sortie, hitting c7, forcing this knight to a6, which is a little bit awkward because usually you would want your setup to be based on c5 and knight c6. That being said, black's play is perfectly sound, and here comes Shakhriyar in his true style, h4. If you don't play h4 or g4 before move 10, it's definitely not Shaq who is playing with white. That's basically how you identify the players in such scenarios. Shaq is playing white, right? There has to be a pawn on g4 or h4, or both, as we will see soon. c6 back, queen b6, unknowingly attacking the b2 pawn, and white dodges that one with a stock standard pawn a3. The idea behind this cunning move is that queen b2 loses the queen to knight a4. This is a very famous and well-known motif. Yep, so Anish plays c5. And by the way, here black is doing really well. So Anish played the opening to perfection. A testament to that is the fact that he's still up on the clock. Shaq isn't. Bishop takes a6 was played. Once again, a questionable choice, but a very practical, very much a practical call. Immediately getting the bishop out of the way. Sometimes the knight can reroute to b8, c6 in a meaningful fashion. And also Shaq is hoping that upon pawn recapture, which by the way is the better take, there is knight a4. I did have a look at this line, and unfortunately it was a very crude reminder of how little I understand chess, because the engine's line is extremely counterintuitive all the way. Check this out and tell me what you think. Knight a4, queen a5 check, c3, c4. Now, I get it, right? So this seals the pawn on b2. It ridicules the a4 knight. It looks really bad. What really confused me was the follow-up. Check this out. Knight e5, queen b5. I get that. g4. Knight d7. I still get this. g5. Takes, and f6. And we are literally trading down to the worst, technically worst positional concept, which is this knight against this bishop, where you would think that, yeah, I will be able to chuck the knight on c5, and we will have the textbook case of good knight, bad bishop. And that is such a sloppy assessment, but when you start analyzing that variation from here with f6, it's not that obvious. Or even from here, where you trade the knight off, then you trade off your good bishop, and you end up in this French-like structure with the terrible French bishop. It is so counterintuitive to actually realize that the dynamic features outweigh the structural ones. A common theme when you play good chess, by the way. And simply white can't organize the army and accomplish the knight c5 setups, because b2 is hanging. And also the queen is glued to the knight. So I would need like 3 moves in a row for for white to make it work. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I did try to make knight c5 work, but of course that hangs b2. Then I went like, okay, I gotcha. I will play rook b1 and then knight c5. And no, you just don't get there. e5. Beautiful break in the center to highlight that it's not about, you know, a relationship between two minor pieces. It's the whole setup, the whole position that we need to take into account. And the white king being stuck in the middle is the most important feature of the position, not the bishop versus knight, which, by the way, after e5 is now looking quite good for black too, because the bishop has an extended scope. I looked at the rook f8, and this was the position when I realized that I don't have anything left for white, because the knight can no longer go to c5. The queen can't move because it hangs the knight. I can play queen d4 because this allows queen d5. But after bishop f5, the knight is still hanging. Now the rook is hanging, and it is all gone. So this would have been the right way to play, but this is so difficult to find. At least it would have been for me. I would not have been able to correctly evaluate this ba6, knight a4, c3 setup. I think it would have been too tough. And it seems that Giri opted for the practical queen takes as well. But now Shak unleashes the typical Shakhriyar style. Bang, g4. I did tell you it was coming. Unfortunately, to my greatest disappointment, it took 12 moves for Shakhriyar to lunge forward with both kingside pawns, but here you go. And now the attack is in full swing. Of course, the engine laughs at it, but the engine has sufficient time and amazing calculating skills. And it turns out that even the engine respects the attack to the degree where it considers knight h7 to be a necessary measure to hold the g5 break. Okay, Anish took the pawn, and he wanted to create a bind with f5, but the problem is that it's not tenable, and knight e5 is going to challenge the g file sufficiently. Take was played, and bishop f6 is already a move that risks virtually everything. The engine believes that bringing the queen back and creating counterattacking threats is the way to go, and indeed it does look quite annoying. If I take on g4, fg4, queen g4 is actually not great, because queen d4, a surprising motif, and all of a sudden it's not about capturing the pawn, or not only, but also defending the mate in one threat, and we just get away by the skin of our teeth, and we again manage to defend yet another very important square slash pawn, and the white attack is not going to break through, but another absolutely insane move needs to be seen for that, and that is the breathtaking g5. Now that is a defensive measure and a half, a marvelous idea. Of course, it is based on the fact that en passant, which as we like to say is compulsory whenever possible, it's of course not, loses to queen f4, and all of a sudden it is the white pawn that blocks the path of the attack. So that's why black couldn't take f4 earlier, for example. Well, here I can because of mate on g7, and that's precisely the idea behind g5, to actually release the queen from the duty of having to guard the g7 pawn and impress along the f file. So yeah, good luck finding these ideas in a rapid game. So instead Anish went bishop f6, which is super duper logical, because it attacks, it defends, looks like the ultimate way to go. But unfortunately it's not the case, because now this exchange sack absolutely shreds black into pieces. The idea, quite ironically, in my opinion, is more positional than tactical, and that's what really makes this exchange sack so beautiful. So let's talk about what is happening here. The concept that white would like to follow, and in fact does go along, is the fact that black has got two pieces that desperately need to come to the defense. One is the concept of connecting the rocks, and the other one is to develop the bishop. Actually, the former would be accomplished by the latter. So if I develop the bishop, then the rooks are connected and the position looks quite healthy. However, developing this bishop is an absolute nightmare, and it doesn't really seem to be doable without taking on e5, which brings the second positional issue into the fray, and that is that takes lands us in an opposite colored bishop scenario, where we know that the attacking side has a tremendous advantage, because whatever threats I create on the dark squares, our opponent bishop, which is traveling on the opposite colors, is not going to be able to defend. And so virtually that lends you an extra piece. So technically we are not an exchange down here, but almost like a piece up, because we will have an extra attacker compared to the number of defenders. And so this pickle of whether to take on e5 and suffer the extra attacker, or not to take but then not being able to develop the queen side, essentially became the decisive feature of the game. b5 was played, takes was played, queen b7 was played, and castles was played. And you can already see, and by the way, please ignore the question exclamation mark there. I really don't think that it was such a biggie. The engine immediately wants to play bishop f4, that in the vast majority of cases, it is actually a transition, no more. And this is a perfect spot for us to observe the difficulty of the defense. So if I want to develop right away, then bishop takes, pawn takes, and then h6 is winning on the spot, because now the defense has been sort of messed with by the presence of the bishop on d7. So that's the number one problem. And in fact, that is such a huge issue that although it is the number one and only problem, it is something that we can't really resolve. If we take on e5, which was the best move according to the engine, then after takes, rook b8, we'll end in a very curious position where black is still really badly struggling to actually somehow make some proper progress in terms of the defense and make connection between the pieces. The teamwork is really, really lacking there. And yeah, white is just breaking through with the superior army. The bishop comes back to e3, and the h6 breakthrough is going to definitely allow white at least a very pleasant advantage, if not more. So that was the big deal here, and Anish thought that his best chance was to actually counterattack with a5. Now the problem with a5 is not the fact that it blunders knight takes b5, which is mighty beautiful. The problem is that it leads to a very stale position where black is going to again lack moves almost to a degree where he's going to be zugzwanged with full board, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, so let's go one by one. What happens in case of queen takes b5 is the first question, and the answer is bishop takes g7, and since that's how the game went, let's leave this for last. So what was going on here? The engine's recommendation here was rook b8, a very curious move. Again, obviously b4 and then queen takes b4 would be optimal with some counter chances, counter-attacking chances. But we also looked at bishop takes, or rather I should say I looked at bishop takes, pawn takes, and then rook b8. And here I found quite a fascinating variation with rook g1, rook f7, queen g6 again. No, that's not it. No, this is the rook b8 line I wanted to show you. My bad. Rook b8 here, rook g1, and a4. That is the line. This is the line. This is something that I'm still trying to get my head around, because in this position, after rook g1, pawn a4, the engine says queen g3 is best, and I'm like, hang on a tick, what's the threat? And the longer I looked at it, the more I realized that black is out of moves. Try it for yourself and you will find out that black is desperately lacking actually any move at all that would be remotely meaningful. So let's single out the pieces. I can't play bishop d7 because g7 hangs right away. I can't take b5 here because I get the most spectacular mate on the board we can ask for right now, which is, by the way, an absolutely marvelous way to demonstrate how beautiful the cooperation among the white pieces are, and actually how atrocious it is on the black side when it comes to cooperation. So I had to try moves like rook a8, just you know, just to try to play something that would make at least some sense, or moves like king h8. But again, now knight g6 check is decisive. I tried, I think, rook e8 or rook d8. Yeah, that's right. I tried rook d8. That was my idea. One of the rook moves. But again, there is just simply nothing that would work. And I think an eventual knight g4 is going to really hurt. Very often you find that the engine in these positions plays, by the way, a precautionary king d1 to avoid the checks before it goes in for the kill with knight g4. I think the main line that I explored here... Yeah, this is the one I want to have a look at. What was it? Yeah, it was Rook A8. It was actually Rook A8. Rook A8, Knight D6, so Knight G4 first and then Knight D6 is a really fun line. So Knight G4, now I'm threatening to take F6 and G7. So the bishop drops back. I tried my best to defend here for black, and it is so depressing. It is just absolutely disgusting. Knight D6, Queen D7, Knight E5, and see ya, the two knights are just coming in too strong. D6 can't be taken because G7 hangs. So I tried instead Queen C7. And then Bishop F4. Now there is an extra attacker here, but this Bishop F4 move is not so easy to find with limited time. And it's an incredibly clever one with the idea of bringing the knight to H6 instead of the bishop. And the bishop will now come from E5. Look at this. Queen A7, check, King H8, and Queen G6. And now the two knights are actually overpowering the defense, and Knight F7 check is unstoppable with, you know, winning both Rook and Queen, otherwise mate on G7. So for example, Queen E7, check, takes, and now Black even has to give up the Queen in order to dodge the mate on G7. Absolutely insane line, because it feels like we're so close to just checkmating here with White, and it turns out that we still need to be quite subtle and play moves like Queen G3, then pull back the bishop. So yeah, that was quite remarkable. I really enjoyed exploring these variations. And then of course there was the game which was just as beautiful. Anish accepted the sacrifice, but then came bishop takes G7, bishop takes G7, H6. And even here, you actually need to showcase remarkable attacking prowess, because at first sight, after Rook A7, it's not apparent how the attack breaks through. And it's still possible to, you know, play inaccurately, for example, with Rook G1, which immediately botches the attack, and in fact, Black equalizes now. I even have to be careful, because if I take after Rook C7 or immediate Rook F1, and I am in a world of trouble. We just failed. The actual winning idea is the breathtakingly epic Rook H1, and all of a sudden, it turns out that the main attacking concept is not to take G7. Nay, it is actually H7 check, so let me play a pass, check, and mate. And this is ridiculously tough to stop. Really tough to stop. So Anish went Rook F2, which allows the king now to run for the hills, or so we thought, but Shak had a different idea here and went like, nay, buddy, you're not running anywhere. I have a queen to sack. And that is, of course, a marvelous finish, a really beautiful one. Rook takes is virtually forced as king takes is mate in 1. Welcome to the combined power of queen and knight in the attack. All squares beautifully covered. And so Rook had to take, but now after the check, everything is falling again. If Rook G8, then we have Knight G6 check, King here, Rook check, and this is now going to be a rapid checkmate again. We'll play this out because it is quite a beautiful King hunt check, and check is the key. And now it's easy to see that this is going to end not so well for Black. Takes, Queen F2 check, and let's finish on this checkmate. I guess that's quite nice. So Anish decided again to run for the hills with King E8, but after Queen takes G8 check, Knight E5, King D6, and Knight D3, it was time to call it a day. The bishop is hanging. The rook is hanging, Queen D8 check is pending, Queen G3 check is pending, and on top of that, the Kroll engine already here announces a mate in a 19, and thus this absolutely sensational attack came to a very cool end. I really hope you guys enjoyed this game. If you would like to turn it into some learning and practicing exercise, I really highly recommend you to engage with this position here after A4, Rook G1, and Rook B8 to appreciate how absolutely hopeless the Black army is, and try to figure out the various defending and counter attacking, or rather I should say the various attacking ideas against Black's already doomed defending attempts. I really enjoyed exploring the various lines and ideas, and I recommend you to do so as well. And I'm super excited to see how this tournament is going to pan out. Lots of very interesting characters in the mix. Of course, we have the world champion Magnus Carlsen, Anish Giri there, streaming legend Eric Hansen, and streaming legend Dania Naroditsky. Richard Rapport is back in the ring as well, so lots of exciting chess to be seen. So stay tuned, because I will be covering more of these games in the coming days. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to sub, to like, to super like, and to comment, and I will be back with more soon. Thank you.